out to the West Coast, baby. And we are starting with the Los Angeles Chargers. And they were a Chargers team that just went 5-12 last year. And, I think this is one of the most interesting teams just off the jump, right? I'm very kind of intrigued to see what this team looks like and how this presents there. But let's talk about the losses and additions, go through free agency real quick. Let's make sure we orient ourselves as we always like to do. Starting with those losses, we have Austin Eckler heading over to the Commandos. Joshua Kelly is gone. Big hits at the wide receiver room. Two top wide receivers, really, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Allen's in Chicago. Williams now with the Jets. Terrell Everett also gone. Starting center Corey Linsley, who we'll talk about, is gone. And a couple linebackers there in Murray and Kendricks who were starters for this team. Now, their linebackers have been absolutely awful the past 6 years. So is that really a loss? Time will tell. And then a lot of additions, a lot of turnover. Obviously, the running back room looks completely different. You move two guys out, you got to bring two in. And they went over to Baltimore and grabbed both those running backs, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. They picked up DJ Chark from Carolina. Tight ends, Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst, which will be an interesting conversation to see who really is the starter. And then on the defensive side, you got Perriman, Fulton. I really like the Joe Alt pick out of offensive tackle there out of Notre Dame. Ladd McConkey and Junior Colson, also some decent picks out of Michigan and Georgia. What are the first takeaways? What are you thinking? A lot of moves. What are we thinking about the LA Chargers this year?
A lot of moves, and mostly it seems like mostly on the offensive side of the ball. Like you said, I think Joe Alt was the most Jim Harbaugh pick of all time. With Jim Harbaugh coming out to LA, he's going to want to pound the rock. He's going to want to hand the ball off to one of those running backs 30, 35, 40 times a game. And so bolstering that offensive line was definitely needed. They already had a couple decent pieces, but bringing in a couple new faces as well is probably good. The strange thing is, like you said, they lost a couple stud wide receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. And what did they do? They really didn't replace those
guys. McConkey, I guess.
Ladd McConkey,
but I guess if they're going to run the ball 40 times, who the hell needs wide receivers? Huh?
Well, this is true. This is true. I mean, we'll kind of test that theory out. But you also bring in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, who, we'll talk about those guys here in a little bit as well. But Gus Bus was that in Baltimore last year to a certain extent, but he's not a really big play guy. He's not going to be the one to carry the ball 20, 25 times a game, most likely. And J.K. Dobbins is coming off an ACL tear and an Achilles tear.
Yeah.
So,
really, especially Gus Edwards, neither of them have shown him the ability to be an every down back and stay healthy or produce at the same level, right? Gus Edwards has kind of always been that change of pace guy. I'm a big Gus Bus fan. Don't get me wrong. But he went from a really good situation in Baltimore to probably a not so good situation in LA. So it's hard to project him to have this massive breakout year. But we will talk about that. And first, let's talk about this injuries. And we're going to start off with the guy who's going to be handing them the ball. And that's Justin Herbert. He picked up a finger fracture in December of last year. I think he broke it twice last year. He got a pin, and then eventually they shut him down and let Easton Stick take it because they were god awful. So the 10th of December, it's about a 2 to 3 month expected recovery timeline. Again, we've talked about fractures, bones. You just got to let that bone heal. Got to make sure it's healing correctly, especially with fingers, because they got to make sure they plate it and everything, get it to where it needs to be, pin it if needed. But I don't have any concerns with him as far as week one. He's got, what are we looking at? 8 or 9 months of recovery timeline. So there's nothing really concerning here. But hey, man, he needs his finger if he's going to be just halfback guy ref.
This is Justin Herbert.
Harbaugh said he's good to go, man. That's all I need, brother.
Hey, as long as if he ended up getting some pins in there, one of those pins isn't rubbing on the ball as he's handing it off 50 times a game, he'll be fine. I'm not too worried at all.
Not too worried there.
Like we were talking about earlier, I think just the running back injury health is the big topic when it comes to
we'll breeze through this next one here. Offensive line, starting center Corey Linsley, tough situation. Really
Yeah,
picked up some heart issues, non-life threatening, but also not something that you want to play with, right? Kind of came out of nowhere. He got it early last season. Was difficult for him to come back. Kind of one of those things where I was reading up on it, and it was basically like you could play, but you're kind of running a risk. And at that point, I think everybody, we love football, but it's hard to, quality of life is a little bit more important. You don't want to mess with something like that. So I think he's making the right decision. It's tough to definitely hang up the cleats, but that's what he's doing. It looks like he's going to retire. They restructured his contracts. All signs point to him retiring. So he was a pretty solid center. So they will have to replace him.
Sure.
And then the running backs is really what we want to talk about here. You mentioned it. J.K. Dobbins coming off an Achilles tear. Week 1, he got injured. He was coming off an ACL. Well, that really kind of massive injury the year before, where it was that ACL, hamstring tear, PCL, where he really had like a knee reconstruction. So there was optimism last year, and then he goes and picks up an Achilles tear, which again, Achilles tendon connects your calf muscles to your heel. Full tear requires season-ending surgery. 10 to 12-month recovery process typically really hits wide receivers and running backs pretty hard as far as getting back. Usually see a dip in production. Now, he did injure himself in week 1, so he's got about 12 months of recovery. But what are you thinking with J.K. Dobbins?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a few of these, Achilles tears for whatever reason. Like the 2023 season was like the year of the Achilles in the NFL. With a lot of big name guys rupturing their Achilles. But the two main ones that we've been talking about are Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers. Both are quarterbacks who don't move around a ton in the pocket at this point in their careers.
Yep.
J.K. Dobbins, obviously a different position, being a running back, also coming off of some other major injuries. I am more concerned with him coming off of that Achilles tear. Like you said, it's kind of right around that timeline as far as week 1 goes.
Yeah.
I think he starts pretty slow. I think he might get some carries those first couple weeks. It's kind of hard to say. They may, especially with him switching teams amongst this as well, they may be a little bit more cautious with him. It's hard to really say. But at the end of the day, whether he's playing week 1, week 2 or not, like, I think it's going to be a slow process to get him back into football shape, if you will. He really hasn't played in 2 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, shocker, breaking news, but the longer time you don't play football, you do not get better at football, right?
Yeah,
We've seen it with Deshaun Watson. We've seen it time and time again. I mean, Michael Thomas, these are guys who were producing, and JK definitely showed potential, but he had really one good year, and that was really it. So it's not like he was like this kind of guy who was producing in and out. So it's really hard to trust him. And right now he comes in as RB2 behind Gus Edwards, who picked up apparently an undisclosed minor injury. They're expecting him to be ready for training camp. So there's a couple guys we've talked about, a decent amount throughout these previews where, this is one we just need to see. Right now there's no red flags. There's nothing crazy, but we do need to see how he's looking when he's returning, because training camp is really when, you pick something up in training camp, now we start talking about what can it affect the season here. We're less than 2 months out. So this is at the point where now it starts to talk about, all right, week 1, like how are we looking for week 1? So again, Gus Edwards, we can't really speak too much about it. We're not going to speculate a ton because we don't have a lot of info on it, but the expectation is he should be ready for training camp. So we will see. Going into that, why don't we talk about, so we got Gus Edwards at RB30 and J.K. Dobbins at RB51. Who would you rather have right now?
That's tough. Like I said, I think Gus Edwards is going to be kind of that bell cow at the beginning of the season, but at the same time, like, I don't know if he's going to be that guy for 16, 17 weeks. I think J.K. Dobbins probably has a little bit more pop, or at least he did, looking back a couple years. With him being at running back, what would you say, 50, 51, something like
51, that? Dobbins,
yeah. I mean, he might be like a free piece in, come round 12, 13, something like that. So, I think he would probably be the route I would go, just kind of worth a flyer at the end of the draft before I pick a kicker. But as much as Jim Harbaugh likes to run the ball, it's it's tough, dude.
Yeah, it's kind of a crapshoot back there, man.
Yeah.
I mean, people are talking about the Vidal kid, the rookie,
Yep.
and he had some productive years in college, but a 6th-round pick is going to be tough for him to kind of work his way up that way. We'll see, but I just think it's going to be a little bit mucky, kind of an ugly situation back there where, they're kind of splitting carries. And like you said, we talked about Dobbins starting slower. Now Dobbins is much cheaper, but I wanna back Edwards here and think he's gonna send to RB1 numbers, but I just can't see it. I think he was in a much better situation in Baltimore, and he never really just proved consistently that he can be the lead guy. So I do think that they run the ball, but I do think it's almost like a little bit of a Denver situation last year where you were getting, well, even less so, where these guys are really just kind of splitting carries, and then you're mixing in the rookie in there and things like that.
And at the same time, like even with Edwards in Baltimore, like you had the threat of Lamar Jackson. You also had some receiving threats out there. We
had a great offensive line.
Exactly. I mean, the Chargers really don't have those receiving options. I mean, Josh Palmer is by far the most proven at this point. Quentin Johnston has been a shell of a first-round pick.
Yep.
And who knows what Ladd McConkey's going to give you?
Yeah.
In his rookie year. So.
Yeah, speaking of those wide receivers, I think, some of the biggest concerns with this team, one of them is that wide receiver room. The other is that rush defense, which we'll talk about a little bit. But talking about those wide receivers, let's look over the fantasy side. Josh Palmer, wide receiver 58. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 50. Quentin Johnston, wide receiver 65. Yeah, the first thing that jumps out to me is I think it's crazy that Ladd McConkey is going 8 spots, 8 wide receivers better than Josh Palmer, right? So Joshua Palmer was the second leading receiver on this team, and the first leading receiver, Keenan Allen, is no longer with the team. So he's the top returning wide receiver. He's been there for a couple of years. He only played 11 games, and he had just under 600 yards. I think this will start getting into some of our bets here, but I think it's insane that Palmer is going after Ladd McConkey. I know people love rookies and just kind of the unknown of we've never seen them, so maybe we can project them a little bit higher, but I think that's absurd. I don't think Ladd McConkey, I mean, let's be honest, he struggled to stay on the field in Georgia in college, right?
I was just going to say, I may be wrong on this, but, he was kind of in and out last season down in Athens.
Back injury. Yep. Low back injury.
And some things that, are just kind of concerning for a 21, 22-year-old athlete in terms of the back kind of stuff and whatnot. So.
Absolutely. Anyway. And then Quentin Johnston, I just think I want no part. I didn't want any part of him last year, and you can save that for the bees, man. That is not for me. So he had all the opportunity in the world last year, and it just never came together. So to tell me that a guy like DJ Chark or even the Jerry Rice's kid out of USC, Brendan Rice, if he gets his spot taken, I wouldn't. I mean, you can only give the kid so many options, right? I know you spent a good draft capital on him, but I just don't see it with Quentin Johnston. All right, let's talk about the favorite part here, the actionable information, the best bets. So I will let you kick it off, my friend. This is the LA Chargers team that was 5-12 last year. Their win total on the season is 8.5, and the over is juiced at -155, and the under is +130. So what say you? What is your best bet for the team?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people are looking really highly of the LA Chargers now, whether that is the Jim Harbaugh effect or just what they did in the offseason. It's kind of hard to say. I think bringing in Jim Harbaugh was by far the biggest head coaching pickup across the NFL.
Yep.
And yes, he has had a stint in the NFL before, and he had a ton of success. I think his first year out in San Francisco back in 2011, 2012, whenever that was, he was 13-3. I don't see that happening in the AFC West. Like the AFC as a conference is stacked compared to the NFC, in my opinion. So with that being said, and this isn't just the AFC, but the NFC as well, I don't see any team that finished last in their division going and winning the division. I don't see any worst to first this year, which is
Okay.
kind of unusual. Usually there is one that is able to do that. The only one that I think has a chance is Cincinnati, and that's really based on Joe Burrow's health. So
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with no team going worst to first at plus 260.
Okay. You're starting us off spicy there. All right.
Yeah, so
I'm racking my brain here.
Yeah. So the Chargers, people are high on them. I am not so much. But I do like Josh Palmer's over 700 and a half receiving yards. Like we just talked about, their receiving room has had some major changes. He's by far the most proven receiver coming back. So I do like him to be kind of that leading wide receiver in that room. So over 700 and a half receiving yards at minus 110.
Yeah. I was just taking a look at, some of the teams there.
Yeah.
I think, maybe the Cardinals or the Bengals are really kind of what that's going to turn into. But you still got San Francisco up there. We did our NFC West preview. We differ on what we think over there, but we'll let you go back and look at that. So, full disclosure, like we talked about, we do not share our bets before because we want to just kind of be independent and kind of see how it is. And sometimes we're on the same page, and sometimes we are in left field. But this is one that looks like we're pretty aligned on here. So I also have Palmer over 700 and a half receiving yards at minus 115. We talked about it. He's the lead returning receiver to this team. I know Harbaugh wants to run the ball, but you got Justin Herbert. You got Palmer, who's shown flashes. Man, he's had multiple games over 100 yards last season. I think he had 2 in 11 games. I think he's someone that actually has real potential. I think he's clearly the best wide receiver in that room. So I'm going to co-sign that one. And then we talked about it, but I think this Chargers team, I don't think they're 3 wins better than they were last year. I don't see where they got better I don't even know if they got better, period. I think your best assets were your wide receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and and Eckler out of the backfield, and all those guys are gone. Right? Yep. Now we bring in 2 aging running backs that have struggled to stay healthy and consistently produce. We've brought in a rookie wide receiver that has struggled to stay on the field. I like the Joe Alt pick, but their rush defense was not good. It's not been good, and they've shown me nothing that tells me they're going to improve it. Right? I like Junior Colson out of Michigan. I think he's a good player. He's a tackling machine. I get it. But their defensive line is still not that impressive. Can Joey Bosa stay healthy? He's just another year older. You got Morgan Fox, Atito Agbonia, and Puna Ford. None of those guys really strike any fear in my heart. And you got Denzel Perriman has kind of been a journeyman himself. I don't think that front 7 is really going to be able to stop the run again. So we're going to talk about it, but you got teams like the Raiders in this division who love to run the ball. You've got the Chiefs with Pacheco who can run the ball. You've got the Broncos with Williams, P. Ryan, and McLaughlin who want to run the ball. So I think they're going to struggle. Give me under 8.5 at plus 130. I think that's an absolute steal. I have no idea how they're expected to be 3.5 wins better than last year. Like the best thing they did was get Jim Harbaugh. Which long term, I really like that. It's a great hire, but come on, what are we doing? Year 1? And then I'm also going to double down and go under 6.5 wins at plus 370. I think they could be a 5 or 6 win team again. They're in a tough division. They're in the AFC, and I just frankly don't think they got much better. So I was super shocked at this number, and I can't believe it's juiced so high to the over 8.5. I guess there's a lot of expectations there. Rookie head coach, I guess rookie wide receiver. But yeah, that's my opinion with the Chargers there. It seems like we're kind of a little bit scratching our heads, but maybe we'll just be thanking the bookmakers on that one.